It's time for Promoter 101, the podcast, hosted by Steiny.
In the history of promoting, there's been many, many agents, but there's only one Wayne Forte.
Promoter 101 Live, Polestar, I'll be there. Come on down.
Welcome to episode 6 of Promoter 101. I'm your host, Dan Steinberg, but you can call me Steiny.
And I'm Luke Pierce. Let's get straight into the news of the week. Welcome to 1998. A Tribe Called Quest is the number one album in America. Their We Got You From Here, Thank You For Your Service, is atop the charts. Dan, did you catch their performance on SNL?
Yeah, you gotta love Chappelle with Tribe Called Quest. It takes you back a couple years. I was feeling nostalgic, Luke. How about you?
It was pretty awesome. Dave Chappelle's opening monologue was absolutely incredible. I also love the skit with Chappelle and Chris Rock, where he made the cameo, kind of trashing liberal elites there. It was something special to watch for sure.
And as most of America, I was the straight man in that sketch that lived out in real time. So I could appreciate the humor in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Great episode, great performance. Of course, rest in peace, Five Dog.
The managing directors of Live Nation Italy reported that they actually do work with secondary sites, aka scalpers.
Yeah, it's not just working with scalpers, they're selling tickets directly to scalpers. And I was pretty shocked about how the Live Nation managing director and reps from those resellers who purchased the tickets were surprisingly nonchalant in their description of quote unquote commonplace practice of engaging, secondary resellers and really screwing fans. Several Italian artists have actually suspended their relationship with Live Nation Italy, and the company's going to face fines from 30,000 up to 180,000 euros for each incident that this time happened. So sorry to see this happening in the Italian marketplace.
Luke, if you don't mind, I'm going to go off script for a second. I'm a big fan of Ticketmaster Platinum and the concept of fan clubs and the VIP sales and the lifts, especially when they go into the pot. But I think when you're going to do anything that has to do with ticketing, the manager and the act share in that gains. And if not, it's sketchy, and that's just not acceptable.
I tend to agree with you on that as well, too. I mean, if this was happening for one of my acts, I would certainly be livid about this situation. This is the promoter cutting an agreement with his secondary reseller to screw fans and jack up ticket prices. I mean, it's a form of consumer fraud in my mind in a lot of ways, and they're manipulating the ticket prices of the market. We managers and promoters set ticket prices to be fair to fans in a lot of reasons, and this is just artificially raising the ticket price. You're screwing the people that want to come to your concert the most.
Well, artificially raising your ticket prices is fine, but I'm all about playing the game. But I think if we're going to play with that level of how much money is out there in the secondary market, we got to do it all together as a team, as a family. I'm a big believer in doing what you can, but it's got to be transparent to the act. The agent, the manager, the artist have to know what we're doing. And if you turn on the lights and you can't defend it, something's obviously wrong.
100%. 100%.
Festival season is upon us again, it seems. Stagecoach already announced the lineup, which is obviously the biggest, most important country festival on the West Coast. Headliners, Dierks Bentley, Shania Twain, and Kenny Chesney. April 2017, it's going to be huge. Other legends like Willie Nelson, Travis Tritt, Winona, and The Big Noise.
Yeah, I was also excited to see that they're showcasing a little more of the Americana acts, which I love. You had Justin Townes Earl, Margot Price, to name a few, but also some throwback to some retro stuff. Jerry Lee Lewis, the Zombies, and Cyndi Lauper was on there. So a few of those things left me scratching my head, but certainly excited about this lineup.
Well, there's nothing country about Cyndi Lauper, but I think everybody can agree she's an American treasure. And the Zombies? I don't know. What's your name? Who's your daddy, Luke?
Yeah. I think there'll probably be a fair number of people sleeping through in Indio at that point and skipping that one. I don't think the folks out there in Daisy Dukes drinking Bud Light are coming to see the Zombie show.
Yeah, but I imagine Bruce Solar and Andy Summers will be front and center for that set.
100%. 100%. After almost 15 years of railing on piracy from Napster, Metallica announced that its new album is going to be streaming for free on Spotify, Apple Music, and YouTube. Dan, what do you think about that?
Look, you could say it's ironic, right? Because they're giving it away now, but I think it's a whole clarification error there. It's like you can choose to give away something versus somebody stealing it, and they've clearly chosen to give it away this time versus Napster stealing from them. So I think this is their decision, and I'm proud of them. Way to go, Mark Ryder and the lovely boys of Metallica, who had an amazing appearance on Jimmy Fallon this week. If you haven't seen it, see what they do with the Roots and Jimmy on Enter Sandman.
Yeah, I like that as well, too. I do have to comment on the irony of Lars Ulrich railing against Napster and then not even taking the middle ground steps of offering up their music on, paid premium subscriptions only and offering it straight to the ad-supported networks of Spotify and YouTube. There might have been an intermediate step where they could have made their case in point here, but, seems to me just like a total flip-flop from 15 years of this.
Now, Luke, he's an adult. He's a man. He has a right to change his mind as an executive in the music industry. And he is an executive, not just a performer. He is involved with the management of that band and their decisions. So as a manager yourself, do you not see things differently today than you did 15 years ago?
I'm not saying that that's not the case. Of course, things change, and the recorded music landscape in the last 15 years has, of course, changed dramatically in those times. I just think that if you're going to be vocal about it 15 years ago, you're going to leave yourself susceptible to questions from people like myself when you put your music out there for free and you ignore the option to put music on premium subscription services instead.
Look, you're not from Denmark. You wouldn't understand what he's been through, sir.
That's true. I am not from Denmark.
I got to stand with Lars on this one. Power to the Metallica fans. Well done.
Speaking of Lars Ulrich and Napster actually reported a profit this quarter, giving some hope to streaming music everywhere. The Napster Rhapsody company eked out a $1.6 million profit on $54 million in revenue, so it's the first profitable quarter in about 3 years for the company. It's a validation of the subscription model for sure. Napster, as you know, does not have a ad-supported network. They only have premium subscriptions. So after a few months of downsizing and layoffs, it's good to see them finally actually eke out a profit.
It's interesting to see they're still in business, too. I didn't actually know they still existed, so good for them.
We were very sad to hear about the death of rocker Leon Russell, who died this last week at age 74.
His wake was last night in Nashville, and today was his service. This is being recorded on Friday, and they'll have another service in Tulsa this weekend, I believe. Lots of great stories were shared. It was about a 3-hour service from the people that were invited to the inside. Leon was a ongoing performer that Emporium worked with, and he was actually to perform with the Tedeschi Trucks at the Ryman on the shows coming up in March. So this is a loss of a friend and a client and an American icon. Will be missed, Leon Russell.
While we're recording the podcast, we were saddened to hear about the loss of Sharon Jones, the vocalist and soul funk leader of the Sharon Jones and the Dap Kings, passed away at 60 after a long fight with pancreatic cancer. She will be missed. We couldn't end the news on something on a low note, but more news from Washington. Donald Trump's cabinet appointments continue to roll in this week. And just as bad as some of the appointments like Jeff Sessions, he surprisingly announced that Motley Crue frontman Vince Neil will be performing at his inauguration. Dan, what do you think?
I think Vince is actually going to be appointed to the cabinet as Secretary of Glam Rock and 80s male makeup. Very excited for that, Vince. I thought when Motley Crue ended, you were done. Good for you, motherfucker.
That's it for the news of the week. Now let's jump into Promoter 101 tweets. It's time for some Promoter 101 tweets. This is the segment in our podcast where we break down some of the musings and rambling of Dan. Dan, who, if you are not following him on Twitter, is the Jew on Twitter. Be sure to go on, follow him right now. We'll break down a few of the tweets that Dan made this week. When a tour accountant emails for dressing stock / catering receipt a week after the show played out. Hashtag Promoter 101.
We all do so many shows, and it's such a busy time of year. It's just unrealistic to believe that anyone's going to hold on to a Safeway receipt for a week after the show. It's just.
Are we talking about like a $20 receipt? Or are we talking about like a $500 receipt?
And I think it was like $230 or something. It was dressing room stock for a show. And it was a theater show. It was a big show. It's just weird that a week had passed and this production rep actually still had it, to his defense. But it was very odd to ask a week and a half later, hey, do you guys have this receipt?
It is a little bizarre.
I mean, if you want to ask that question, you ask it the night of show. It's not like asking for the sound invoice or a venue security bill receipt. It's such a small thing on a show that grossed over $100,000 that it seemed inconsequential to me, but more of the what can we make you do to go digging through files.
When the support acts agency demands the show settlement sheet, as if that the headliner would ever allow it. Hashtag Promoter 101.
This has become more of a sneaky kind of thing lately, as the opening acts agent requests the deal sheet, and it's just not kosher. The headliner, their deal is really their deal, and in a lot of cases, major agencies will hit an assistant and they won't know any better. But we've been noticing pop up more and more. It's just like, it's their deal. You guys are on a flat, you're their guest. It's inappropriate for you to ask. And when you get caught, don't be surprised if you get sold out to the headline agent's team.
It's pretty bold and pretty presumptuous.
Of me or of them?
Oh, of them, of course. We're talking about a $250 support slot or a $1,000 support slot on a tour, presumably, right, Dan? We're not talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's happening more and more. I'm noticing one agency in particular that continues to try this, and we're watching for it. But I imagine they're seeing those deals, and it's just not right. Those deals are really cut between us and the artist, and it's not our place to make those public deals to anyone else.
All right, last one for this week. When an artist is not allowed to spend the money in marketing, then questions you why shows were not marketed heavier. Hashtag Promoter 101.
Spending money on ads is an investment into your artist's career long term, and also for the success of the show. Don't be cheap and cut corners. It just doesn't make sense. Luke, you're a big advocate of spending money on the gross of the show to increase the gross of the show, and shit, you might spend more money on ads by percentage than most managers I work with.
Yeah, I would imagine that our percentages of gross, our ads as a percentage of gross are particularly higher, especially on first plays in the market. I'm all about investing in awareness, and it's not about that particular one play. It's about coming back and playing the large room the next time around. So I want people to know that my band's in town. I want them to know who they are and what their music's like. So yeah, I'm going to spend money.
Which is all well and good, but usually that's my money you're spending.
I like to think of it as our money, Dan. So
I know you do, Luke. I know you do.
Happy to see that Dave Brooks and Amplify Magazine broke the story about Emporium Presents adding a Birmingham office. Dan, what's going on in the South?
Well, it turns out as a partner at Emporium Presents, I am well aware of this story. Todd Coder has joined our team, and we couldn't be more happy about that. Also, his assistant Emily's coming along for the ride, and she's nothing but a spark of joy for us. We're looking forward to seeing some shows at Avondale Brewery this summer and seeing where else we can be. The Lyric and the beautiful Alabama Theater. It's going to be a great run.
You can find Todd at Emporium Presents. Send her a note. Give him congratulations.
That's .com, by the way.
We're very excited about this week's feature interview with Sonic Entertainment's Louie Thomas and United Talent Agency's Nick Meinema. Dan and I had a chance to sit down with Louie and Nick at a sold-out Trailer Park Boys show at the historic Ryman Auditorium in Nashville, Tennessee.
So Promoter 101, we're backstage with the Ryman on a sold-out Trailer Park Boys show, and these things don't just happen. It takes management and agents and promotion style. So we're joined with the manager, Louie Thomas, and the agent actually through most of Canada.
Not most of, the whole thing.
Only Canada. All of Canada.
So Nick Meinema loves fucking with me whenever we're anywhere, and we've done a couple panels together, and usually I wind up being the ass of the joke. So this is going to be a fun day, and we're going to spend tomorrow at the Titans game together, so I imagine I'm going to get my ass kicked during most of that too. So it's good to have both of you gentlemen here.
Nice to be here.
Nice to be here.
So neither one of these guys knew we were going to do this until about 3 minutes ago, which is the only way that I knew I could possibly get them to say yes. Let's talk about the success of not only the Trailer Park Boys, but the business of the Canadian acts coming down into America, which is something you guys can both speak about, as the Canadian music has invaded our culture, much as the British invasion did back in the 60s as of late.
Okay. Trailer Park Boys, well, as you know, I mean, you've been a big part of it. I mean, ultimately, it was just trying to get a sense of where there were a little bit of, try to find something to ignite. And so, I mean, we came down and tested a few markets. And then obviously, as you know, it was, we had great reaction. And then we felt, okay, we can come down here. Netflix was obviously a massive part of the success down here. And unfortunately, for us, we don't get any measurements whatsoever from Netflix. So a lot of it's really, monitoring the socials, monitoring Facebook, any of the analytics that we can find, and we can, and then we can sort of dig out what markets are working. Then we come down and we perform, make sure we're doing the right rooms, try to underplay as much as possible.
Well, and it's hard because we don't have album sales per se like a band would to work off of,
We've
since
got
it's
nothing. Yeah.
comedy and TV is based on turning on a TV and watching it. And if, like you said, Netflix won't share the data with us, which they won't,
Yeah.
we're flying blind. So it's really about figuring out where the fans are most vocal about, come here, come play for us, and trial and error.
Yeah, and as you know, we focused a little bit on some of the traditional media too, like sort of take the shock jock type radio stations, work with them, buy the late night TV, little packages, that kind of stuff, and stuff that was a little bit more effective for this audience. And but I still think it's about trying to pick the right rooms, the right ticket prices, scale it correctly, so you're maximizing the dough. And you want to have sellout shows. That goes without saying. We all want that. The artist wants that. So really, I mean, that's ultimately what we've been focusing on.
Just from like an armchair perspective, watching Trailer Park Boys just absolutely explode here in the States, and watching what you and Dan have accomplished here in the States for the last couple of years,
It's all us, yeah. Me and Louie did it all. The guys are just along for the ride, apparently.
But I got to comment on the explosion of what Netflix has done for the business, and how it's a great tool to expose new audiences to what's going on stage here tonight. But it's not necessarily a huge place where you can advertise and buy marketing dollars with. So have you relied mostly on that to grow your business here in the States, or have you found other avenues to market this band?
Well, I mean, the reality is that when the show ended in Canada on Showcase, there was really no outlet for the show. So a lot of it, before Netflix picked it up, actually, it was just, YouTube. It was just basically peer-to-peer type promotion, and that's how people discovered it. And that's ironically when we first came down. And then, I mean, I still believe that point where it ended in Canada, just on the commercial broadcaster there, they had a bunch of deals done around the world on second tier comedy networks, but a lot of it was internet ultimately. So I think when we sort of came down just at the end of the Showcase stuff, and and I think we helped sort of ignite the interest as well, because there's no, I mean, obviously Louis C.K., there's a bunch of comedians that come down, but there's a comedy television property where the stars go out and do a live sketch comedy touring thing. So that was a bit of an anomaly, I think. So it allowed them to be in every market, which, I think really helped, basically. And then help the interest from Netflix's level. We don't get any, I'm not shitting on Netflix by any means, but...
Well, there wouldn't be a product in America without Netflix, so clearly they're a great partner on that level.
But unfortunately, they don't, we can't push to Netflix subscribers, right? That would be the obvious thing to do.
You might not need me if you could, actually.
No, but I mean, just pushing okay, we're just a tour announce. No different than, okay, we have a new season. Because, I mean, anyone that watches Trailer Park Boys on Netflix, they would, they're obviously the data, they push out and go, okay, there's a new season to watch. We can't actually do that with okay, we have a new tour.
There's no promo video.
It would make sense, but they don't do that, unfortunately.
So, and with that, Netflix created demand in the States where we didn't really have a huge demand before. Canadians that moved down, border towns we had been doing okay business in, but we weren't taking on Texas by any means yet until Netflix came into play.
Yeah, true.
Did they still, since the show was over by the time Netflix picked it up in America, before it had come back with the new demand, was Canada as strong as the States were, and is it still as strong as the States are? Nick, you could probably speak to that.
I think what ended up happening was at the end of the television property, as it was known in Canada, Canada had them for a while live. And I think the great thing, and Louie, I think you'll agree, is it really took off when it was starting to be not overplayed by any stretch, but when it was starting to be somewhat fatigued in Canada. all of a sudden America really took off, and Louie was able to, and the guys were able to kind of give Canada a break, which allowed us to reset ticket prices and also reset markets, and didn't have to go pound the tertiaries. We could just play the majors and have the people from the tertiary markets come to the majors. And I think, in some markets on the last tour that we did, which was the Canadian tour 2 years ago in the West anyway, it was the biggest numbers that the band that the guys had ever done. I always call them a band, even though they're not. Well, technically one guy is. But
Band of lunatics.
Yeah, but the reality is, in markets like Calgary and Edmonton and Toronto and Hamilton and Vancouver, they had the biggest shows that they ever had. I don't think that comes without kind of giving Canada a break and focusing on other territories.
Yeah, I mean, that's no different than how you deal with music as well. You need to sort of starve it, and you need to have success in other territories. I mean, the other part of it, though, too, is when we initially started doing some of the live sketch comedy, it started in clubs, obviously, like anything does, but it didn't really work there. It didn't really
needed
work.
a theater, a seated vibe, even the smaller theaters.
Yeah, I mean, as crazy as the theaters are, and they seem like, okay, this is completely fucking out of hand and stuff, but it's not really. It's still under control. It's like a controlled
because every band comes in and sells
chaos.
Hamburgers off the stage for $10 a piece.
Exactly,
that's normal.
That's what we were saying, yeah.
Was it 20?
Yeah. It's whatever they handle.
It's whatever. It was 50 too, right?
There's no change register.
But
Thank you very much. Fuck off. Have a good night.
It was good to get a reserved seat and just get it. Also because you can hear every gag. So and that's important. Obviously, in comedy, you can actually hear everything. Also, and that was a big part of it. Sightlines, obviously, the video is a big part of it. In a club environment, that was sort of really.
Where are they the biggest?
Tough.
Is there a city in Canada they're biggest, or is there a city in Europe? I know they're big in Minneapolis and Milwaukee. Where's the biggest market for you guys overall?
It's Calgary and Edmonton in Canada.
It's probably Calgary. Yeah, Calgary, Edmonton, Toronto's still big. I mean, Ottawa's big. NAC was big. They're all.
I think there's a venue issue in some of the markets where I think in Halifax they would be bigger if there was a 2,500 seat theater. Sure. I think just what's happening in Newfoundland this year is like the business is there. Unfortunately, the venue doesn't allow us to do the kind of show that would dictate whether that market is stronger than the other. Yeah. But the Jubilees in Calgary and Edmonton, the last play, they were completely sold out, and you couldn't fit anything in the room.
Yeah, Chicago obviously is huge. I mean, we've sold out Chicago Theater there 3 times now. London, UK is 3,000-4,000 tickets, so it's big there. But again, you do need to. I mean, we were going through. Okay, what are we going to do next year? I mean, we need 3-4 years between markets. That's I think key with this.
Letting the world miss you is like definitely important here in the States. It's allowed you to develop your businesses in either territory, flipping back and forth there. Are you able to take that same approach in Canada as well too, where you can go into some of these major markets and let the tertiaries come to you? Does that restricting the supply of dates, apply like you can do here in the States? It seems like that's worked for you guys here. Is that working?
I think it just was timely. It came at a time where, the guys had played. I don't think there's a theater in Canada over the time that they haven't played, whether it's a 700 seat, 1,100 seat. I think they played everywhere in the early part of their touring. And so that was able to be established when they stopped playing the tertiary markets. And just there was a need and a want to see them. And if you're going to see them, you had to drive to Calgary, Edmonton, Regina, whatever you had to go to.
Yeah, I mean, their time is also massively limited, because they write everything, on the TV property, or not the TV property, but say the web property, the Netflix property, the films. They write everything. They're very involved in even directing it. They're editing it. Everything's done at their facility in Dartmouth, right, back at home in Nova Scotia. And so it's not like a typical musical band mentality either, where they could take a full year and just not bother going out. Please
don't do that.
Which is
I
great.
got to put my kid through college. I need them on the road.
Me too. But I mean, that's a great thing to not, the biggest.
One Canadian date this year.
Yeah, one Canadian date, yeah.
We did one in February. But
You guys had your dates already. Fuck off. This is our time in the States.
That's the biggest.
Shut the fuck up, Canada. They're American now.
That's the biggest problem with Canadian artists, because, I manage a few of them as well, and Nick books a few of them as well. I mean, if you need other territories, you need other things to do, because you need they need to continue to work. And these guys, obviously, they've got a good global career on the touring level, global career as far as the television property.
What's the Canadian market, by the way?
Well, for us,
You're doing one this year, right?
Well, we did.
we're only doing St. John's, Newfoundland. We've never
Comedy Fest.
did Comedy Fest in Sudbury, which is they're both tertiary markets.
That's odd, right? Because usually you guys do about a week in Canada, right?
And the only reason we're doing Newfoundland is because they have not. The last time they did Newfoundland, and I'm from Newfoundland,
You?
Is this a fucking joke?
It's just not a funny joke, but
They literally went down.
His ass off.
They literally went down behind. They went and did a club basically, and they just stood behind the bar and rolled spliffs, and that was the show. No fucking joke. So that was the last time they've been. So there's sort of a bit of a need for redemption at this point. So they're playing basically the arena down there this time. Yeah,
when we
which is pretty
played
funny.
Denver a couple of years ago, we did, instead of a wine tasting, we did a weed tasting with the guys. And it was after the Denver show. And we invited all of the dispensaries to bring down 2 of their weedographies or whatever.
The most
guys,
exciting strains, I think.
right. So they brought down their exciting 2 staff. They could take pictures, and this is what the Trailer Park Boys smoked with us. And they actually smoked them out. And we actually did this in the Emporium office in Denver after the show, because you can't do it in a public place. It was closed off to the public after the show. And I'd never actually seen the moment where Mike looked at me and was like, no more. It was like they had been smoking for hours. And I was like, really? He's like, no, bring it. But it was amazing to see all of that weed laid out and everybody fighting over what was the best, and they really wanted to know what the guys thought the best weed was. And when you roll that many joints and smoke that many consecutively, nobody knows what the fuck's going on.
I would have no idea.
I would say that, just to your earlier point, with Canada, most of the larger artists have had more success. Most of, not all. There are exceptions to the rule, Tragically Hip, etc. Great Big Sea, for that matter. But most of the larger artists have had to leave in order to have the bigger success that they had. The Bare Naked Ladies is a prime example of that. And we represent this band High Valley, who's been in Canada for 10 years and on
Great
independent labels. And just, they're great guys. And they started as 3 and now they're 2. And they've played churches, community centers, and supported and played festivals. And they got a record deal here last year on Warner Brothers. And just the idea of them having a deal in America and having options in America has pushed their price in Canada. They're on no different trajectory in Canada singles-wise, although they're selling a little bit more. But just the idea of what you said earlier, they have another market to play, and so therefore we don't have to go and play everything that we're offered.
So is it because they're now cool in America that they're cooler in Canada because of that, or is it because they're not available as much that it's pushed up their demand?
It's not the word cool. It's an economics.
Effort,
so there are
opportunity
truly
cost.
40 places to play in Canada. There are more. There are less on certain tours. But if you're really going to do a cross-Canadian tour and you're a domestic act, you can, if you stretch it, play 40 markets, and you're playing everywhere, and you're playing, sometimes you're playing a theater and a field house and an arena in order to do it. But the idea that there are other places to play allows you to say no, and we all know that no is the most powerful word. And when you don't have to go and do everything that you have to do in order to keep food on the table as a domestic, solely Canadian artist, it allows you to say no, and it allows you to put that money up.
Nick, you're an agent down here in Nashville, but you were in Toronto for...
I started in Oakville, Ontario at a smaller company called Live Tour Artists, and then the agency group and I did a deal, and I was there for 5.5 years, and then I've been here for almost 5 years.
Sure. So having your experience and leading the office for UTA down here in Nashville, having your experience in Canada and be able to translate the experience you have in Canada and cross people over into the United States, how valuable has that been to developing acts, in North America in general here?
I would love to say that it was valuable, but on the case of High Valley, Brad, who is, the singer in the band, and his brother Curtis, they did it all. I can take no credit for it. He worked this town. He got himself a record deal. He got himself a publishing deal, and then management came into place. It's union. So Brian Coleman, who does Nickelback with us, but I hope that the expertise that we have helps in future. But in that case, I can take no credit, only for the part that I've been a part of the team for 9 or 10 years.
Well, let's talk about Canada has a much more supportive community behind the arts and cultures. You have grants and money behind it. Radio has to play, was it 30% Canadian content?
Yeah,
It's not always a great thing.
Wait a minute, explain that. Why isn't it a great thing in your mind? Because it seems to me it gets you guys seeing more airplay on acts that probably wouldn't have gotten it otherwise.
Most radio stations, and I've said this publicly, so I don't mind saying it here, and this is my opinion solely, not the opinion of the artist I represent and or the company that pays me or Louie, but they look at it as
12 listeners, man. Don't worry about cleaning it up.
Okay, well, hopefully there's not... Okay, anyway, it doesn't matter. My point is they look at that as a ceiling. So you made a comment, or you just said... artists who would not get airplay, therefore could get airplay because of that. Yes,
is that not true?
It is true. But the artists who should be getting more airplay and put into international heavy are limited by the fact that there's a ceiling to it in most cases. For a Canadian artist, specifically in country music, to get a international heavy spin rotation, which is the difference between 15 and 20 more spins a week, is literally happens once, maybe a year or 18 months. And for that, it has done great things for Canadian artists for many years, and I think it will continue to do it. But as Stompin' Tom, the late, great Stompin' Tom Connor said, most PDs and radio stations treat it as a maximum and not a minimum. And then there's also like these other tricky rules of Shania Twain and Terry Clark and
how many people are actually Canadian.
It's like Shania Twain never had a Canadian record deal. She had a Canadian record deal through an American lead, and so it does amazing things for many, many artists. But what it does do is it just holds the reins just a little bit, in my opinion, for an artist to break right out. And you see that in other formats that it's happened. Great Big Sea, although not a radio band, was completely, as far as I know, embraced by the country and did the touring of an artist that most American and most European artists coming to Canada couldn't do their kind of business. Yeah. But there's 5 of those in a country of Canada. There's 5 of them. Sure.
Yeah, I think just on the CanCon thing, Nick is right.
CanCon, can you explain that?
That's Canadian content. That's what you were referring to, the 30% radio thing. The reality is most of the Canadian artists, that's the stream, to Nick's point. So you end up, there's one available slot for CanCon. So they don't look at it, there's one available slot, period, or 2 available slots. It's like, if it's Maple, which is sort of the formula that recognizes the Canadian content amount, as if you fit in that, then, it's like how much do we have available in the CanCon, on the CanCon portion of the playlist, right? That's his point regarding the ceiling as opposed to the minimum.
Well, you guys have got a couple acts that are just big in Canada that have never broken through in America, and not you guys in particular, but Great Big Sea was never as big in America as they were in Canada. Tragically Hip was never even close. They were arena acts across Canada. Bare Naked Ladies broke through. Rush broke through. Obviously, Celine
Blue
Dion.
Rodeo, Our Lady Peace,
right. 5440. It goes so deep.
A ton of them.
It's so much easier to the Bare Naked Ladies. It's a lot easier to list off the artists that have
Sarah McLachlan.
Sarah McLachlan's did great business, but many.
Will you guys apologize for Bryan Adams Here and Now?
I won't.
The album Here and Now?
Yeah, no. No, I won't.
Standing behind it.
I just won't do what you're asking me to do.
I think the record sounds really good. I just don't think the songs are that good, quite frankly. But
I think there's
that's close enough for me.
And I don't know it to a detail, but I did love the Tragically Hip played Saturday Night Live, and for until Gord got sick, I didn't know the story, and then all of a sudden the story came out that
it's very timely, obviously.
Yeah, but Dan, it was like, why did they play that? Was there Dan Aykroyd was asked to come back as the host. This is my understanding, and said, I will on one condition, that the Tragically Hip is a musical act, and that was a big moment for them, and that laid the ground of they were great border states, and there were some markets. We represented them, the almost, I think, the whole way through. Steve Call in our New York office, and
they're Jack in the state or in Canada. Is that right?
They're Feldman in the in the States, but Jack was there at a time when he was working with them. I think Ralph was too.
Here?
No, up in Canada when
you said the States. Sorry.
Yeah, in States, I think it's always been Steve Call, or it has been for many, many, many years. And they had it was if you just looked at if you didn't look at them as an arena act in Canada, their business in America was great, but compared to Canada, it was not what it was in Canada.
Okay, so breaking through from that, because we're Canadian act, shouldn't really matter as an agent, because you don't care if you're signing an American act, a Canadian act, or a Russian act, as long as they've got talent and you can sell that product. that's the place to be. And as a manager, obviously it's easier to discover acts in your backyard, but I imagine if you found talent when you were at South by that you fell in love with, you'd sign them.
I would try to sign them, yeah.
But
yes.
you wouldn't hold being American against them.
No, definitely not. No.
I notice you have no problem taking our money.
Correct. Except when I'm coming across the border, you have to change your... why are you here? I'm a promoter and I'm importing your talent.
Does it affect how many dates you want to do in Canada versus America as a manager at the moment when our dollar is so much stronger than yours at this particular moment? Because normally it's closer to 1.1, it's 1.3-ish
No,
right now.
I mean, it can't. I mean, the reality is, as I think we've sort of alluded to, it's hard to break America for Canadian acts anyway. So, I mean, at the beginning, we're down here trying to sort of develop an audience ultimately. So the money is really not necessarily the first thing that we all think of. We're trying to get in front of people, obviously, as far as support type situations, or do smaller rooms and try to develop a fan base. Ultimately, that's what we're trying to do with, say, Alan now after Great Big Sea disbanded, and say Matt Anderson and even these guys when we first started, just because a lot of the Canadian, at least anyways, the acts that I work with, and it goes to say, I mean, we're not able to sort of pony up 50 or 100 grand to get going in alternative radio, for instance, if we don't have a deal down here, but we want to come down here and start working down here and try to develop an audience down here. So the money is not, the guarantees, for instance, are not, it's definitely not even a consideration. So the dollar is not a consideration.
On the flip side of the coin, as a promoter, buying shows in USD versus in Canadian, how is that affecting your decision process right now?
I mean, it's just numbers, you put them into it's just spitting out what you're comfortable with your risk. And obviously what, you do your research, and ticket prices are probably a little bit higher because of it, but I think that ultimately the audience is okay with that, used to that. I mean, a lot of the stuff that for the region, I only promote in Atlantic Canada. It's not necessarily intentional. It's just what happens.
We should point that out, that you're not only a manager and you promote as well.
Yeah, promote concerts in 4 provinces and
where you happen to be the
Canada.
major player in those provinces. There's not a ton of competition.
I mean, I compete and partner too with Live Nation and Evenco and et cetera. But I mean,
more competition that you would think.
Yeah, I mean, he would know more than me. I mean, I don't go out. I mean, I don't know. Like, sometimes am I bidding against stuff? Probably. There's a decent sized casino in one of the markets. There's a smaller casino in the market that I live in, and there's definitely other promoters in St. John's that will pony up big time. But back to if you're doing arena shows in Atlantic Canada that are American artists, a lot of those type of artists, I mean, there's 500 to 1,000 people that live there that will get on a plane and go see them anyway. So they're not, the idea of, okay, if the P1 is $99 instead of it being $87.50 somewhere is not a big deal.
Sure.
Which will make up your, the 35% difference on the dollar. So
and let's define P1 as price level 1, the most expensive VIP ticket.
I have no idea who's listening to this thing. So I say 12 people.
And they're all his buddies.
I would assume the 12 people that are your buddies know the fucking difference.
There's like
between
at
a
least
P1
20
and a
people
P2
that we know about that listen to
Shout out to Argentina, who we download in Argentina this
so
week. Which is amazing.
I want to give my phone number, and everybody can call me. I technically want to do it.
He thinks this is his version of Tinder. It's awesome. or would that be Grindr, Nick? So you've moved to gay people can be married too. So you've moved to America. You've opened up an office here in Nashville for UT. It was the agency group. Now you're with UTA.
UTA, 14 months. Yeah.
So, and you handle a variety of different acts, including one of the biggest movie stars on earth, who has a band, Kevin Costner.
Yeah, and we also represent Billy Bob Thornton and his band. And the office is, when we opened it as the agency group, and it's no different when the merger with UTA happened, or the acquisition, whatever you want to call it. We wanted to be a music office in Nashville, Tennessee. Did we want to be more sufficient in country music? Yeah, we really did, and we're making waves there. We're pushing the limits, and we're developing talent. And Kurt Motley joined us from another agency, and he brought Toby Keith and Jamie Johnson, and we do want to be more present in that space, but. Do we want the Nashville office to be a country music office? The answer to that is no. That was never the intent at the agency group. And when we sat down with the board of directors at UTA, we laid out our plan, and they went, like literally, that sounds like a great plan to us. So we're a music agents we're a music office in a worldwide agency is what we consider our Nashville office.
So encompassing guys like Lance Roberts show that you do have those country veins, but you also have the ability to book everything else.
Yeah, Lance was a big deal, and then Travis and that whole Bobby Roberts deal. It's a big step for us. Number one, others in this town have tried for many, many years to put a deal together with his dad, Bobby, and we just got along, and we talked about it, and we took the right roads. And Lance and I, I've talked about this publicly in other publications. I wanted to work with Lance, and if we could have done a deal, and I've said this, with Lance, we would have just taken Lance. And Lance was such an honorable guy and loves his family and loves, the relationship that he has. He's like, if we really want to do a deal with me, then you've got to do a deal with my dad. And that was the last conversation that we ever had with Lance about doing a deal with him. It was always about, let's find a way to make this right for Bobby. And that was the core of laying that ground. And I will say this about Lance. I don't think there's a more respected guy in America that books country music. I don't think there is. He gets every call returned. He's just a great agent. Artists love him, promoters love him, and he's fair and he's honest, and that's just not regular, in my opinion.
How much of the contemporary stuff are you seeing come through Nashville? It's just not country music based. You're seeing some of these songwriters, A&Rs, publishers move down here that have like no focus, or move focus from CCM to country to pop alternative stuff. You're seeing people come in from New York, Los Angeles.
It's been going on since 1990. Alan Jackson had a phenomenal record called Gone Country, and everyone thought it was like the movement into country music because country was really hot at that time. And I've been a country music fan since there was none of them in the town that I lived in. But the reality of it is that was a song all about people from other formats and other things going, hey, I think there's a ticket here. And I think that's been going on for, the better part of 30 years and will continue to go on. I think Nashville as a community is more creative and more versed than it ever has been. And I think people are moving here from all genres of music and all walks of life because of the creativity of the town, the economics to live here, and there's a center heartbeat of people who want to see other people do well. I love comedy, and Nick Nuciforo in our LA office, I just like to sit down and talk with him about comedy, not about the business of comedy, but about the guys. Like Jerry Seinfeld's Comedians in Cars Getting... I watch it religiously. The interesting thing about comics is, they'll come up in a group, and when they come up in a group and somebody spikes, all of a sudden they go, fuck that guy, because they're having success and they're not. That is not...
Haters gonna hate.
But that's not the vibe in this town. And that's the amazing thing about being here. And I can come from Toronto, and I can say that. I came to town, and there was nobody in this town who wouldn't take a meeting with me, wouldn't say, hey, it's going to be really hard, but we wish you luck. And there wasn't any of that, fuck them, we're going to put them out of business, fuck them, we're going to slay everything that they've got, or we're going to, is there competition? Yes, but it is a very creative town, and I think there's a core belief in the stakeholders in the town that all ships rise with the tide.
Well, and you've got an interesting path because you don't always just take the mainstream, I'm going to book every single one of these acts. You've got a lot of Canadian country acts that have done very well for you.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you rep Hulk Hogan, or at least you did.
I did. I don't anymore.
So Trailer Park Boys to pro wrestling, I think it's appearances mostly, right?
Yeah,
or something like that.
It was appearances.
But the fact that you found value in an avenue and revenue in something, and you're like, I can make that work, I can sell that. You're the P.T. Barnum of the Nashville agents, where you can find something and you know how to sell it. You put your mind to it, go, no, that's not exactly what I just did with the last act, which is also something Swanson's good at. Brian Swanson, who has Trailer Park Boys in America, has Kid Act, and he has a PBS act, and he has a very adult contemporary act, and it's like, and then he's got the Trailer Park Boys, which is like nothing else on anybody else's roster.
I think I only know Brian. I know him by name, and we've talked over the phone and email. I met him for the first time tonight. A guest at the show that he.
Would you guys consider fighting it out to the death, and whoever wins gets the act for the world?
Yeah.
At least those.
That's how good the business is.
No, fuck that. At least those hoodies,
And I got a hoodie. But I all of those things to be true. But it goes back to an earlier point that it's the way that I grew up. Like I grew up as an agent with people who wanted to represent talent. And what is the definition of that? I don't know. I don't think I work with anybody that I can't sit through the show. I don't work with anybody who go, I can make some cash with this and I can book it and I can represent it. I don't think there's anybody that I represent collectively in our office that I can't go to the show and enjoy the show. So I think there's a passion that comes with that too.
Louie, what about you? When you buy an act, do you have to like it? Do you have to be passionate about it, or is it an investment? As a manager, I believe you got to be deeper, but as a promoter, I get this a lot. You have to be in. Do you have to get it, or do you?
Well, okay.
Or do you have to get that it's
I
gonna
promote
sell?
kids shows. Okay. So, but I had, and my kids
You were a kid once, right?
I was.
Or
a
were
kid
you born
once.
with a bottle of Jack Daniels in your hand? Because I could envision that.
I don't drink JD, as you know. But I book, those fucking mascot type kids shows. But I book them.
Those fucking.
Oh, whatever. They're like B-level actors dressed up as fucking Dora and stuff. But anyway.
At least it's Disney.
But yeah, I mean, but I did that because I had kids. There was no kids shows, and it's like, and my friends at Pacan, they did that stuff, and I was like, yeah, I'll try that, and it was good. I mean, it's good. Fuck, kids are liking it. It's like, that's fine. It's not a big money maker because the ticket prices have to be so low, so it's not. But I mean, generally, yes, I promote things I like and I would go see. And I typically do go see most of it as long as I'm able to go and available and home. Have I done people a few favors before? Definitely. But I mean, from my perspective, where
You might not have seen Nick raising his hand at home because we're not on video, but Nick's hand went up quick on that.
But I mean, the thing about promoting for an independent promoter, and it's no different. The same goes with sort of as a manager, and similar. Everything right now is, to me anyway, it's very A&R type driven, or at least the old, whatever A&R used to be. You have to go out and you need to find stuff early. For me as a promoter, I need to get involved early. If I want to, I mean, that's how I started my promotion side of my company, is I had friends of mine that were managers who were touring their artists in the region that I lived, and they literally called me and go, can you take care of her while she's here? Can you do a couple of shows? Yeah, sure. And all of a sudden then I'm a promoter. And then it's like, okay, club, fuck, you can't make anything in clubs. I mean, it has to become a business too. So it's like, then you need to start doing things in clubs that you can get to the theater, that you can get to the arena. And in order for me to do that, I can't compete with Live Nation when they're doing a national tour.
You probably can, because they've only had one profitable quarter since they started, and I imagine you make money when you promote shows for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the year, yes, I make money. At the end of the quarter, I make money, yes, obviously.
And you have to, right? Or you just couldn't keep doing it.
I can't do it, But I mean, it goes to the point, my point is, like, if all of a sudden there's a national tour and the artist is already developed, it's hard for me to compete. It's much easier for me to go, okay, let's start on something early and continue to work it up through and then I can keep it. And then, when it's when it is a national tour, it's like, okay, it stops in Quebec, and then Louie gets it for Atlantic Canada. And fortunately, most of the domestic agents, I mean, it's different obviously with the American agents, because in some cases it may be one call, and it's like, okay, and it may not even include my region. I mean, the region that I'm in is a tertiary market in itself, so it's not really.
But it's beautiful in the Maritimes.
I agree. But it does, that's the challenge, though, as a promoter there. That's all.
Well, and you talked about this, and I think it's a big part of the industry. A friend calls and said, can you take care of this? The socialism in our business, getting to know someone, the hang, wanting to work with your friends, and that's a big part of it. I mean, Nick, we've known each other for years. We spent a lot of time raising glasses together. Louie, I think the tour never would have worked out to this level if it wasn't about spending time and enjoying at a trust level, but working with your friends.
Agreed.
How much of the business is about working with who you want to work with?
I still think it's a huge part of it. I mean, it's why it's why we all get on a plane. We want to, I want to try to meet. If I can get 10 more relationships every year, that's good for my business. I mean, I don't want to, I have to continue to develop what I'm doing, as we all do. So you got to go out and meet people. There's younger acts, there's younger managers, there's younger agents out there, that will work with those younger acts and younger managers, and we need to all develop relationships with them for sure.
You and I have done very little together. If our company has done a lot with you, and agents, have come and gone and done a lot of work, but I know we will. We've as you said, raised glasses, and we've, been on panels together, and just the right thing is I've called you. That doesn't make sense for me, and I haven't needed the favor. But I will say this, Ralph James and Jack Ross and Steve Herman, those are the guys that brought me into the real leagues, right? I my
all
triple,
guys I consider mentors as well as you do, which makes us family.
My
one way or
AAA was
another.
awesome, and I don't want to discount that, but those are the guys that really, really, taught me. You either have an instinct to be an agent or you don't, but they taught me the value of having relationships. And I was coming for years to America and not doing any business because I didn't have anything to sell, but I built relationships. And then all of a sudden, when I had something that I could get on the phone with, all of a sudden you have that conversation like, I know Nick, I know that good guy, whatever that thing is. But to me, I say this to my wife, I say this to my father, and my kid is 4 years old, and I say to him, I could make a lot more money doing something else. I enjoy doing this, and I like the crazy people in it. And so for me, the relationship is the most important part of the whole equation. Yes, everyone has to make money. And yes, as an artist starts to grow, the deals have to get harder and tighter. They just do. It's just natural. But do you have to put the people who were in there in the beginning in the mix? You have to. And if you don't do that, to me, eventually you're the guy, on the other end of that equation where you're just known as the guy who takes and doesn't give. And I believe that the success in this business comes from that give and take. I know it's cliche and I need more liquor, and I likely wouldn't say that, but the reality is I haven't had enough liquor, and so therefore I'm being truthful. I just truthfully believe,
that date. Let's mark the date and time where an agent was truthful.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
Or didn't have enough liquor.
No, that's because we've been doing this fucking podcast.
No, and
Exactly. Good
the
point.
Trailer Park Boys are on stage, and we should break back to the show in a minute. But I want to thank you guys for taking the time and doing this. I think it's fascinating that the business brings it into this world where even when we don't do a ton of business together, we have friends in common, and the lapping thing is there where we know when the moment comes, we're going to be off to the races.
Great point. Thank you both for being here.
Thank
today.
you.
Fantastic stuff from Nick and Louie. And this week we have a bonus interview from Emporium Presents promoter rep Rich Sellars. He stopped by Dan's office in Seattle for a chat.
Promoter 101, we're joined in the Emporium office today here in Seattle with Rich Sellars.
Thanks, Dan. It's great to be here.
Can you share a little bit with the general world what a production rep does?
I'm the guy in the middle that takes the stuff from the promoter,
Guy behind the guy?
the guy behind the guy. Now, I take the information from the promoters, people like you, and talk to the venue and make sure everything stays in budget.
So it's all about people skills, staying in budget, and working with the acts. So
Absolutely.
you're the liaison between the acts liaison.
Correct.
So road managers, agents, venue guys.
Yes.
All the guys that wear the black shirts at the venue day of show that are smoking cigarettes outside the back door.
Exactly.
Those are the people you liaison with.
Oh, and I love them, yes.
All right, so you've had a busy couple of weeks, right? You just got off the road with Trailer Park Boys where you guys
Correct.
did a run through the South.
Yes.
And you're their guy, per se, where you jump on the bus and you're with them their entire run.
Correct.
That's pretty specialized circumstance.
It is. It is. I've been told I'm the only guy in the world that gets to be on that bus. So there's a lot of trust and a lot of, personalities that fit. That's important since you're in a tube with people for a few weeks at a time.
Now, do you have to be tested before you get on the bus with them?
I do, for all forms of sexually transmitted disease and social diseases.
So you've been jumping around the country. You're just out right now with
Celtic Thunder and Sturgill Simpson.
You jump from act to act and bunk to bunk, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
You ever get a show where you walk in and you're like, I have absolutely no idea what this is?
Yes.
Okay, so where do you get the traits to figure that out? You're a musician?
I think the musician side is helpful because you have an idea of what the act itself is going through, what it's like to travel from place to place.
So the venues, some of them are good, some of them are bad.
Depending on level of experiences with the management at the unions, that can differ a little bit. The unions are typically pretty consistent. These are all pros. Speaking
of pros, you're backstage. You see the shit that the public wants to see. You're on the bus. You have the stories. Without dropping any names, what's some of the cooler shit that you've seen that would freak people out?
Isn't a whole lot of crazy stuff going on behind the scenes.
A lot of Words with Friends being played backstage, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Everybody's really good at Monopoly and Boggle.
What are some of the highlights? You're a foodie?
Oh, yeah.
So you travel from town to town. You get to essentially be Anthony Bourdain, like loading is done or there's a day off. You get to go explore.
My jam is that I'll take my per diem and use it for one nice meal so I can go check out something cool in each market.
Soul food, I want to say, has got to be big in the South. You've
Huge.
done the hot chicken in Nashville, right?
Oh, yeah. Prince's, Monell's, Yum in Nashville, Meat and Three.
Finish loading or have a day off, and we're going to go explore the deep South.
And the locals know. They know their jam, especially, your local runners and stuff who pick up food for acts. They know very well what the good stuff is.
In Philly, they're telling you what the jam is, where to get the best Philly cheesesteak sandwich.
Yep.
So you're getting to experience all these beautiful theaters, all of these different food, and then you're seeing a lot of them repeatedly over and over again. Acts like the Trailer Park Boys or the Avett Brothers or Straight No Chaser that you see multiple times a year going back, 12 years now or something, right? So you know a lot of these guys. There's that family vibe when you're on the road with them, right?
Absolutely. And as with the venues as well, with the production managers there and stuff, as you get to know these guys, they become family.
Never met a guy that didn't have that blank look of, I don't fucking remember where I was Tuesday, let alone what the best is, but have that vibe when they walk into a room. I've been here.
Right.
Couldn't necessarily say what act it was, but I know this room.
Right. I know it's going to be smooth. What the room looks like, I can't remember.
I bet there's a loading dock and a catering area.
I'm sure there is. Probably.
Promoter 101 joined with Rich Sellars. Hey, Rich, I want to thank you for being here and joining us today.
My pleasure, Dan.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. We've got some exciting stuff coming up next week, plus a special holiday edition.
I'm very much looking forward to it. You can follow Dan on Twitter at The Jew, and you can follow me at W. Luke Pierce. And of course, follow us both at Promoters 101.
And email us any of your questions, your comments, your thoughts, your deep personal concerns about the industry and where it's going. We need to hear from you, our listeners, to figure out where the industry is going and figure out how to make a better day tomorrow. God damn it, we're together as a team and as an industry, and we need your support. Thanks for tuning in to Promoter 101.